Well, hello everyone. Some time ago, I was making a journey up from London, where I live, to see some friends in Lincolnshire. Now, I need to explain that I was using my car to make this journey, and that my car is somewhat of a classic vehicle, a Morris 1000, which doesn't have the same ready facility for a sat-nav technology as modern cars. So I was making this journey using my road atlas, which I'd carefully looked at beforehand and noted the various roads and places I needed to go through in order to get to my destination. And really, it was only when I got past the major roads, the dual carriageway, the A1 particularly, and got onto quieter roads, that I came to have that feeling, that sense that I was on track. I was going to arrive at where I needed to go. And in fact, as I was driving along, noting the roads, the villages, the towns, various landmarks through which I was passing, that degree of reassurance kind of grew within me. Now, of course, we know that for all of us, life at this time is a journey, but it's been a very bumpy journey, to say the least. But we are not alone in experiencing life in this way. Back in the Old Testament, there was a man, a prophet called Isaiah, who was similarly engaging in his journey of life, but also finding it extremely bumpy and indeed hazardous. For him and his compatriots, the people of God, they were experiencing a really severe threat of foreign invasion. And yet God, into that bumpy journey, brought to Isaiah a message indeed which wasn't just for him, but for those around him. And the message is contained for us in the Bible. And I want to read some perhaps familiar words from Isaiah chapter 9. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in a land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdened them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Now, you may have noticed from that reading there were a number of words and phrases which were describing, as it were, the bumpiness of the road, the journey in which Isaiah and those with him were experiencing. They were walking in darkness. They were living in a land of the shadow of death. They had a yoke that burdened them, a bar across their shoulders. They were having to experience warriors' boots and garments that were rolled in blood. You know, these do not paint very pleasant pictures, do they? And yet God, in describing these things which they were experiencing then, was pointing them to something else. He was telling them that although they were walking in darkness, they would be seeing, indeed had seen, a great light. A light had dawned. Their nation would be enlarged. They would be rejoicing as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. Those boots, those garments would be destined for burning. And the reason for that goes on in verse 6 of Isaiah 9. For to us a child is born, a son is given. So what God was doing was beginning to expand their understanding, to show them a bigger picture. It was rather like myself on that journey, as I was seeing more and more around me and noting that actually this was the route I needed to take. So it was, God was speaking to Isaiah and showing him things which were bringing him assurance that he was on the right track, and indeed God was at work. God was working through these words to bring Isaiah and those with him hope, which they desperately needed in the darkness which they were experiencing. And that's the same for us, particularly at this time of Advent leading up to Christmas. It's as though as God brings to us different scriptures, he's expanding our understanding of Jesus and God's plans through him to give us hope. And the more we see, the more we read and understand of what God is saying, the greater that degree of hope is within us. Now, that's not to ignore the issues which we are having to face, but rather it's showing us that God is at work. And as we experience and realise that God is at work, so we have that measure of hope growing within us. So my prayer is that as we continue on these Sundays, looking at various other scriptures concerning the coming of Jesus and what he meant to do, what he was aiming to do, our hope also will be growing, our confidence, our reassurance that Jesus is the way, the truth and the life, and that we trust in him and increase in our trust in him, so our hopes will be growing as well to know that God is at work in our lives. So I just want to end by repeating those descriptions of who Jesus is, what he was coming to do. He is the wonderful Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. May we each one know the hope of the Prince of Peace in this time for God's glory. Amen.